I'm Jim Check. You're watching Now Media with me, Joe Cote, with Merchant Growth. He's the Chief Growth Officer there. And you guys just did a survey, and then it's outlining some economic concerns, but a lot of small businesses are starting to feel that or have trepidations as to what's coming, I guess it would be a fair thing to say.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, Jim. Certainly, we've surveyed businesses across the country. In particular, obviously, when we're talking about BC, we really want to understand what the business owners were seeing. They generally have a first-hand, immediate pulse on what's happening throughout the economy. They're generally more urgently impacted based on whether it's consumer spending, pullback, and or supply chains. And with the overarching question around are we in a recession or is one coming, it was really timely for us to go out to the businesses to see what are they seeing and how are they feeling.
Yeah, we just had a negative growth quarter. We just had zero point 0.1 negative here, and it looks like May might be as well as that, because that was April, and May will report soon. And if that's negative, I mean, technically that would be a recession.
Absolutely, and it's certainly concerning, and I think just over half of the businesses in BC have basically said the same thing. They think that we're already in a
Yeah.
recession, whereas about 25% of them actually think maybe we're not there yet, but we're most likely going to be there within the next 12 months was their overall sentiment.
Yeah, the stat is a backwards looking thing anyway, so we're through both of those anyway, and it does feel like that. And a lot of the numbers that we see, especially rising unemployment, stuff like that, and then lots of businesses failing. And then obviously the specter of the trade tariffs hanging over our heads as well. I mean, there's a lot of negativity for sure.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And one of the interesting things that we saw or have heard from businesses is that, you know, not surprisingly, but 75% of them are actually very concerned about a potential recession. And 65% of them are actually already acting on it by actively cutting some of their spending.
Yeah, I hear that as well. Like a lot of people cutting hiring, cutting just investment in capital and stuff like that too. And even our own government has said that one of the problems here in British Columbia is that like capital is not investing, right? Capital's kind of fleeing. And then I guess what tell us about your companies first of all, Merchant Growth. What is it that you guys do for businesses?
So, Merchant Growth, we're one of Canada's leading fintechs in specifically financing, digital financing for small businesses, along with growth solutions. We've been around for 15 years now, and we help thousands and thousands. We've already helped over 10,000 small businesses to basically not only just kind of survive, but very much thrive in even whether it's economic downturns such as this, and or to be able to set themselves up for wonderful growth ambitions and as a small business founder, our CEO and founder grew this business as well. We are very dedicated to partnering with and advocating for small businesses across the country.
Yeah, sadly, in economic storms like this, there is opportunity as well. And it just depends on which end of it that you're on, right? So there's that fear and greed mentality right now. There's a lot of fear out there. And then I guess the ones that have more confidence can actually grow their businesses in this time of where a lot of businesses are pulling back.
Certainly. And, one of the things that we have found very interesting in these times is there's a great deal of entrepreneurial spirit due generally to the lack of options that are out there. And we've recently been talking as well to small business owners who have pulled back on hiring and what is the impact as an example on seasonal industries and or students looking for work. And we've seen this in past as well, where generally you start to see a little bit more entrepreneurial spirits coming through along with the how do we set up net new companies to make money because I can't find the traditional job that I thought I was going to get during my summer break. So fingers crossed that there's a lot of optimism to be had. I would say our small business owners are some of the most resilient business owners. They see firsthand what's happening in the economy. They are able to adapt fairly quickly, and they have wonderful opportunities with local communities as well as growth solutions like Merchant Growth to be able to position themselves to take advantage of these opportunities and or whether they're headwinds or tailwinds, there's always an opportunity in all of this messaging to say how does this business actually kind of come out of the other side of this and being even better off for it.
You guys just did a survey, and you've done surveys in British Columbia and nationwide. What is the kind of like the standout results that you see in British Columbia, and then compare that nationally?
Well, one of the things that was really interesting is that 57% actually believe that we're already in a recession, and 25% said, you know what, maybe right now we're not, but we will be in the next 12 months. And as you said, Jim, it's kind of unfortunately one of those things that you're already in it by the time you actually are technically in a recession, anyways.
Yeah.
But in particular, in BC, was understanding that 75% of them are obviously concerned for their business. And the question about that is, well, how are they going to work through that? How are they going to position themselves? And what are they really doing? What we found very interesting from BC small business owners was, in particular, that there's those two ends of the spectrum. They are very much concerned around and seeing reduced consumer spending and managing their supply chain and costs on the back end. Margins are kind of getting squeezed on both ends. We are seeing them cut spending. They're pausing expansion plans. They're delaying on hiring. Some of them are already cutting. And unfortunately, the other part to that is that whole reduced inventory with the tariff impact on top of that. I mean, it's a whole lot for a small business to try to weather the storm through. But I would say the vast majority of them are fairly still optimistic that they think that they can weather through it because they're doing the right things to manage through this tough time.
And what is the spectrum of small businesses that you're looking at? Is there certain segments that are doing worse than others when you look at it? Like what is kind of like the gambit of business that you're looking at? Like from maybe just give us an idea of the business that you're talking to.
Yeah. Merchant Growth in particular, we support all small businesses across the country, across all industries. What we're obviously noticing more impactful kind of moments right now are tariff related. And in particular, is going to be anything from construction, steel related, which, by the way, is quite broad. You can be a restaurant owner, and unfortunately, the beer that you're purchasing and or the supplies that are being distributed to you are all impacted by tariffs, by cross-border goods and or packaging. So that ripple effect is quite broad. And I would say that there are seasonal implications right now where some of the businesses are seeing less or are maybe a little bit more concerned around um, the impact that they would typically see from a seasonal perspective. So when we think about like tourism as a really strong example this
Yeah.
time of year in particular, they're just feeling a little bit more of a softness associated with it. And then you have other industries that are seeing really strong cost implications. And especially when steel tariffs went up to 50%, it was just unfortunately like another blow to an industry that was already hard hit.
Yeah, and then labor has been one of the bigger issues in Canada for a while, but now we're starting to see that unemployment number go up. So I imagine some of those pressures on labor easing, and then people are cutting back, so that's going to actually even drive that unemployment rate higher. But like you're saying, most of this stuff is related to goods then, as opposed to like on the labor side.
Well, certainly, I would say that is the strain on the cost management of their business. And your point is very valid that that's really what's driving a huge component to the softening in the spending side. So when we think about consumer spending, the business owners are already telling us that we're actually pulling back on staffing up for seasonal industries in particular and or for supplies because we just already see the trend of softening consumer spending happening. So they're quite in tune with not only just like the cost management side and how they're running through that, but they're being extremely wise and savvy about how do they manage the investments that would generally otherwise be very beneficial for them. As an example, like patio season, just buying new furniture, setting up outside. Maybe they're just pulling back on that a little bit more than usual.
What are some of the bright spots in the survey, if there is any, that you've seen?
Well, I think one of the things that we love to see and say is small businesses are some of the most resilient business owners. And I say that a lot because what the surveys told us is that over 70% of them actually feel confident that even in a recession that they will come through the other side very well. I mean, that's kind of shocking to a certain extent that there's that much confidence in it. But given the actions that we talked about, or those tactics that they're deploying, both in terms of anticipating consumer spend and managing their costs, they know what to do. They know their businesses extremely well. And we see that in our conversations throughout our daily lives here, where we do a lot of work with small businesses that are actually looking for capital to be deployed to either take advantage of sales and or changing their distribution channels. So they're using capital very wisely, which is another plus. And then the third part to it is, I would say, the advocacy side for small businesses that are saying, you know, what would be really helpful is let me thrive through this environment, help me with financing, and advocating to the government in particular for permanent tax reliefs, small business deductions, whether it's refundable credit for supply chain diversification, wage subsidies. There's a lot of heavy things that are kind of draining a little bit on the cost side, but they're saying, you know what would really help us is actually these types of tactics, and I think that the governments are starting to listen to that. We certainly see that across the country, that there's a lot of work in progress to create relief. We're just hoping that we're going to see a little bit more meaningful and tangible and immediate support policies by the government for them.
Are there some provinces that when you're looking at these surveys, that are doing worse than others, and some that are standout? What would you say when you look across the nation, where some of these provinces fit on the best and the worst?
Certainly, I would say that there are certain industries that are geographically located in certain provinces that are probably more impacted. Ontario and Quebec, in particular, I think have seen a little bit more of a brunt in some of the tariff-related policy changes or taxes, and we are seeing a little bit of a ripple effect on those businesses in those geographies and the local communities. Where some of the bright spots actually are specifically BC as well as Alberta. So even though not immune from tax implications, but we are starting to see a little bit more strength relative to some of the other provinces, particularly out west, which is a great positive sign kind of coming into the summer season.
Yeah, BC still owns like some of the higher inflation across Canada, though. I mean, that's not a bright spot as well. But I mean, a lot of business. I mean, I think a lot of people are used to that one now. But inflation's still running high, and unemployment's still running higher here in British Columbia as well.
Certainly, certainly.
Yeah. Any advice for small businesses out there right now for as they face this economic, I guess, try to weather this recession or perceived recession?
Yeah, I would say that there's a couple of things that we kind of always talk to is number one, for those small business owners, when they're looking on the cost side of their balance sheet, supply is key. And obviously, with not only just tariffs, but the amount of uncertainty that came along with the on again, off again tariffs and the threat of more tariffs and such, actually has caused issues in the supply chain in and of itself. So being able to be in tune with your own supply chain, but as well as your distributors and or sub-suppliers, just kind of pull that thread a little bit longer, make sure that you understand where goods are coming from, what the potential impact is. And then the other part is really understanding, is there other alternatives to what you're typically seeing in your supply chain, so that maybe you're supporting more domestic and local, and or you're just also on the revenue side, depending on your business, looking for net new markets to sell into. So there's a great opportunity for small businesses, and we see this again a lot at Merchant Growth, that there's business owners that are pivoting, that they're using capital wisely to be able to actually take advantage of stocking up through different distribution channels and or opening up net new markets to them. And then the second key part would be certainly, continue the advocacy through business groups, and ourselves included, as many other local business groups, advocating for policy changes in particular to support them. I kind of keep going back to rent, utility subsidies, tax reliefs, but permanent tax reliefs. We saw obviously the government announced a 6-month tax deferral, which is quite honestly kicking the can down the road when businesses are actually still feeling the pinch right now. That's basically a balloon payment that's coming. So I'm hoping that we're going to see a little bit more from the government, both federally as well as provincially, that supports business owners, specifically on tax and wage subsidy.
So where does Merchant Growth fit into this? Because there's traditional lending, which a lot of businesses have been using, traditional, like from the big banks. And then there's also BDC, that is the business development bank. So where does Merchant Growth kind of fit into this equation for small businesses?
Well, our bread and butter certainly is about service and speed. And when business owners actually want capital, they don't want to wait 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks for capital. They don't want to go back and forth to branches and with a lot of documentation where they feel very much judged and criticized. And when a small business owner needs financing, they want financing
Did he just freeze there? Let's see if he comes back.
as they do. So
Oh,
small
I think
business
back.
owners come to us quite regularly and also on a repeat basis because we can fund same day and we meet them where they're at in terms of what they need and how much they need.
So more of a in the between BDC and the traditional bank kind of thing, or just completely on its own thing?
We certainly try to think a little bit more on, we're not competing with the big banks. We have no ambition to be one of the big banks. We love being able to very directly impact the lives and talk to small business owners. So we kind of sit somewhere in between. And what we love is that back in the day, the consumer business was very similar with regards to the banks and other providers. And we saw a large degree of, maybe almost borderline saturation of consumer driven financing providers to support Canadians. And that's where Merchant Growth steps in very much for the small business owners across the country. Is we are that wonderful provider that can support you real time outside of the banks.
So is this for operating lines and or capital investment kind of thing, or is it a blend of both, or just to get an idea of what the services that are offered there?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, our clients prefer certainly term financing. They have a very specific need and they have a very specific window to which they want to leverage that capital for, and that's where we certainly thrive. I think that's one of the opportunities for us is, again, kind of meeting the business owners where they're at. Sometimes they're looking for lines of credit, which is also a doable option for sure, and it is one of our available products. But certainly the most popular for small business owners are that term financing product.
There you go. Anything else you want to add today?
Jim, I think we covered a lot. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and we will continue to obviously offer a lot of support to small businesses, but we'll continue our advocacy campaign with government policy to help support small businesses, and hopefully what will inevitably most likely be the news around the recession. Not that I want to forecast that at all, but hopefully we see a little bit more optimism in the months ahead with even interprovincial trade barriers coming down. Hopefully that supports all of our small businesses across the country.
Let's hope that that one is true, that the interprovincial trade barriers come down and have more of a one economy instead of 13. I think that'll help a lot, and see what happens with C5. But I do believe we're likely in this recession already, because it's always a backward-looking thing when we're looking at stats. But hopefully, those two things actually help turn it around, and then obviously the investment climate gives some people reason to look up.
Absolutely. We'll do everything we can to support businesses. And, if there's one group of Canadian business owners that we think are going to thrive, will be small business owners. They, like I said, the most resilient of all the business owners. And we love to be able to partner with them.
If you make it through COVID, and then all of a sudden, from the Okanagan, you made it through the wildfire stuff, and it just seems like you're getting punched a lot, but then that builds calluses, so you get stronger, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
Well, Jim,
we look for a better day, and happy Canada Day as well. And thank you for coming in. If you do another survey, reach out to us, and we'll talk to you again.
Would love to do that. Happy Canada Day to you too. Thanks, Jim.
All right. And thank you for watching Now Media.
Thank you.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no